Hello and welcome to the Reimagine podcast. I'm Deborah Epstein and
I'm Claire Sangster, and we are here today with a special guest, Julie McCammon. So, Deb, Julie, and I are all John Barnes trained myofascial release therapists. The training for myofascial release is done in the States, and it's quite unusual for people from the UK and Ireland to end up at those seminars. But both me and Julie happened to be at the same one once in either 2016 or 2017. And so we first connected, I think, just because we were both from a different country. But yes, she has now written two amazing books that we are very excited to talk to her about, one of which has just come out in the last couple of weeks. And yeah.
I actually met Julie when I was working at Therapy on the Rocks. I was blessed enough to have her as a patient there, and we connected. And then when I left there, she stayed in touch. She was a client of mine in my first cohort of creative coaching, and it's actually the container in which she wrote her first book, Finding the Mystery Within. And I remember the journey of that, and maybe we'll touch on that a little bit, but love to welcome Julie McCammon to the show. And here she
Hello.
is.
Thanks so much for having me, you guys. It's lovely to see you again.
Yeah. So Julie, just you can if you want to talk about the Finding the Mystery Within, if you want to talk about your new book, but let's just hear a little bit about you, your background, and yeah, you can.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm a physiotherapist based in Northern Ireland, and I had struggled with my own health issues for many years, a sort of chronic fatigue, post-viral fatigue after viral meningitis, and was at the point where I thought I was going to have to stop working as a physio because I couldn't function between the brain fog, the fatigue, and the pain. And then I'd heard about myofascial release. I and heard that it was more gentle for the therapist to deliver it. So I went off to America to start the training because I thought it would prolong my career as a physio. And little did I know that I did three courses back to back the first time I went out. Because I was traveling so far, I thought I would get my money's worth and do as many courses as possible. And because you're getting so much hands-on treatment when you're practicing on each other, I came home after those first three seminars with virtually no symptoms. So I dove into really deepening my understanding of the whole myofascial treatment. And then through meeting Deb, through receiving amazing treatments from her that were life-changing, I I heard during lockdown that you were doing a 10-month conscious creativity program. And during lockdown, obviously I wasn't able to work. So I had got into the routine each morning of just journaling and reading and writing. And I suddenly sort of thought, there's more in these journals than just for me. So I reached out to Deb and said, I thought maybe your course was more like artistic creativity, and I thought I'm not artistic. So, but yeah, you said it was a perfect container. So that was really where my first book was birthed. I, and then I came across an understanding about 4 years ago called the Three Principles, which is really an understanding of how our mind works. And through my fascial release, I definitely had deepened my understanding of the whole mind body connection. And through the three principles, then I started to see that a lot of my patients who struggled with chronic pain conditions were quite anxious. They were definitely sort of caught in a fear loop about their chronic pain. And I felt that that was actually perpetuating their pain. So that then started me on a path of really diving into the whole latest pain neuroscience. And I discovered that it was very much saying exactly the same thing as the three principles. So I actually ran like a pilot study with four of my clients who had struggled for years with chronic pain conditions. And I decided to do like a 6 week program that would teach the latest pain neuroscience and the three principles and understanding of how our experience is created in the moment. And I did that over a 6 week period. And pre the study, I did like a pain score questionnaire and functional ability questionnaire, sort of medications that they were on. And after the 6 weeks, I repeated that and I was blown away by the results.
Mm,
So that really inspired me to try to put everything that I'd been teaching them into a book so that it would reach a wider population. So
mm.
that has been the birth of my second book called Quiet Mind, Quiet Body.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love the journey of that. And one of the questions I had as you were speaking was, um, well, I don't know that I knew that you did that to get that information. I was like, wow, that's really cool that you did that. What was the experience of the participants were, you know, as you were working with them and working in that way with them, that's
Yeah,
what they
it was
got. And yeah.
it was very different for me, because I'm so used to working one-to-one and hands-on. So it definitely took me out of my comfort zone, to sit with these four ladies, one night each week for 6 weeks and try to teach or share what the insights and the understanding that I had gained as I had really researched the pain neuroscience and just dove deeper into the understanding called the three principles. So yeah, like at the start, a it's very hard to explain the three principles because it's something that's formless and you're trying to put it into form in order to use words to try and explain it.
Mhm,
A So it can be a bit of a struggle, but they do use a lot of like metaphor and story and
mhm,
to try and convey that. So at the start, like definitely a few of the ladies were like, what is she talking about? But that's exactly where I was because I came across this understanding through my husband Peter, who's a coach,
mhm.
and he came across it about 5 years ago and he would try to talk to me about it and it just went over my head and I was going, what are you talking about? What do you mean it's all thought? But it wasn't until I read one particular book called Painless, which is a fiction book by a lady called Hannah Studley, that I started to really, the penny started to drop for me. I started to really see that people get caught up innocently in a cycle of fearful thinking,
Mhm.
and that is interpreted by our brain as danger. And the brain only knows how to produce pain in order to try and protect us whenever the brain senses that we're in danger. So people are innocently, and I've been there too. Like I'm not sort of saying that it's just my patients because then I had an experience just before I came across the three principles. Actually, I tore a disc in my back and I was in agony. I've never experienced pain like this in my life. And it went on for 18 weeks.
Mhm.
And now looking back, I can see how I innocently got caught up in a real cycle of fearful thinking. Like I was thinking, I'm a back pain specialist in Northern Ireland. So I was thinking I'm meant to be the lady that fixes people's backs, but and if I can't fix myself, how can I fix other people? And yeah, I overtreated myself. I And because I was so attached to the outcome, and it wasn't until 18 weeks after the initial injury, when I knew intellectually in my mind that the disc would have healed itself by then, but I was still in excruciating pain. But I remember vividly one night just reading a poem on Facebook, and I can't remember what the poem said or what it was even about, but it just was enough for all that noise in my head to quiet down. And I went to bed that night and I thought, even if you need surgery, you're going to be okay. Because that was another real resistance that I had. I did not want surgery. I, so yeah, I sort of detach, and I could hear John Barnes say, detach from the outcome. And I just went to bed that night and thought, you're going to be okay. You're going to survive, even if you do need surgery. And I woke up the next day and I was pain free.
Mhm.
I, so
Yeah,
yeah,
that
that's,
that really speaks to what you're talking about, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, too, for us as therapists, I mean, a lot of the reason we get into therapy is our own pain. I mean,
Mhm.
I know my MFR story was, it's a little different than yours. I
Mhm.
started out as an artist, and it was through art that it was more of an emotional pain, not so much a physical pain. And I was so tuned out of my body that, like, all of my paintings in art school were, these major displays of like anguish and pain, to the point
Mhm.
where one of my teachers was like, "You're such a demure young woman. Where is all of this coming from?" And I was like, I don't know. Maybe it's not mine. It might be from, pain of the universe or whatever. I was so disassociated. And that was the beginning of my journey, but I went in from art to an expression into more of the emotions, energies, belief systems, then into the body. And so I'd done so much work on kind of the outside of the body. When I got into the body,
Mhm.
it was like, wow, all this stuff's living in here too. Like, I wasn't even tuned into. So it was, when I hit my first seminar, and it was the recorded one, the recorded MFR one. It came to Providence when I was living on the East Coast. And I remember going there, and I would come home and talk to my husband about this guy, John Barnes. And it was like, I thought it was a recording you were watching. Yeah, he wasn't really there, was he? I'm like, no, but I was talking as if he were there because
Mhm.
his message was so impactful to me. And what it did was, like, it linked everything together for me, all of the things, hermetic principles I was learning, and belief systems and energy work. And it tied it all together and brought it into the body in a way I didn't understand before, because I thought of everything as being a separate sort of experience. And once I got that, it was like, it took off. It was total, like, duck to water moment. But my experience of pain in my body is more of, like, the emotional pain is where what gets my thinking going. When I feel my nervous system trigger in, like, an event that, maybe triggers an old belief pattern, then I go up into my head, I notice, and then it's, I don't get caught in it like I used to, because I've learned so much over the years. I've been doing this like almost 40 years. But, it's that pain is, I'd love for you to address the emotional aspects of pain, not necessarily the physical. And, you know, can you work with the three principles in the same way that you would through physical pain?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the basis of the three principles is that thought produces feelings and feelings produce behavior. And the feelings can be sensations or emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be pain or it can be anger. I, so it really, like we are thinking creatures. We have like 60,000 plus thoughts every day. And it really struck me, like before I came across the three principles, I just believed every thought that popped into my head. I believed it to be true. But a thought is just a thought. And thoughts come and they go. They're like clouds in the sky. They're always on the move. And I love that quote. I can't remember. I'll probably butcher it, but it's like we can't control which birds fly over our head, but we can control which ones nest in our hair.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So it's exactly the same with thoughts. When a thought pops into your head, you have the choice to grab a hold of it and start to add a lot more thinking onto it. And when we do that, that creates our reality.
Mm-hmm.
I, so yes, there, and I think it's important to note also that emotions and sensations, we tend to label them as positive or negative or good or bad. But all emotions and all sensations are neutral until we start to add the layers of thinking on top of it. So yeah, I think it's just I've become a lot less judgmental of myself
Yeah.
and others, because we innocently get caught up in our thinking. And even though I've been around the three principles for going on 5 years, I still get caught up in my thinking and believe,
Well,
you know,
yeah, I feel like we live in a world that's wired that way.
yeah.
So that's kind of what I feel, where we can all kind of take a break against judging ourselves. Because I know like this other spiral that we do is that in our healing journey is we always come around and but we're up another layer, so it's a spiral pathway, and we always go like, I thought I healed this, why is this coming back up again? Oh my god, I must be doing something wrong. But we don't, we kind of forget that we're separate from others, but we live in a connected world, and things that are going on in the outside world as we're going through this big transformation. You may not have like a direct event happening in your life. There's something in the field. What's in one is in all. And
Mhm.
it can trigger, a response because you're feeling it. And then you go into your pattern, and then like the pain starts and the cycle and the loop and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. What do you have thoughts about
Yeah,
that?
because when I say that my pain went overnight, like my back pain has been an issue since then, but I found each time that it has happened, especially the second time, it was really acute again. And I thought, oh no, here I go for another like 3 or 4 months. And your thinking just goes there and you can't control it. But I remember thinking, no, I'm sore, but I'm safe. I'm going to be okay. And it went again so much quicker.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just about reminding ourselves to not be afraid
Yeah. Yeah. I
of,
think there's a tendency too to like create our future from past events,
yeah,
from the known, right?
yeah,
That's the I think you quote it in your book as well, Julie. That's the Lorimer Moseley example, isn't it? Of the so there's this very well quoted story from a pain scientist. I can never remember what he is, but he's a funny Australian dude
mm,
who tells the story of he's talking about how the context really impacts pain. So in your language, that would be the thinking, and he tells this story. I always tell it to patients because I think it's so impactful. As a story that he was walking through the bush in Australia. I can't say Australia without going into an Australian accent. Sorry. He was walking through the bush in that country, and he felt a sharp scratch on his leg, and I can't remember all the parts of the brain, but in the thing that he talks about, which we can put in the show notes, he says that he goes through and he's going back through his past experience, and he's like, oh, when I felt that, that's usually a scratch of a stick, and he's like, okay, that's not life threatening, that's fine, has no pain, nothing, jumps in a creek, swims, gets out, promptly collapses because he's been bitten by an eastern brown snake, which is one of the top 10 most poisonous snakes in the world. Somehow survives that, and then 6 months later is walking through the bush again in Australia, and feels something scratch his leg, excruciating pain that drops him to the ground until his friends tell him that no, he has actually been scratched by a twig this time. And it's such a potent example of the power of the belief system or thinking around the experience of the pain. So we were talking about this before we started recording, of like, in an ironic twist of the universe being the universe, I woke up this morning and put my back out before coming on to do this podcast about pain. And I was telling Deb and Judy that I, for whatever reason, my nervous system's response to this was to laugh because it was so ironic. And I thought I read Julie's book in the last couple of weeks, and I was thinking about this thing of like, okay, it's not as bad as I've done it before. If I just wait, if I just observe my system, it's gonna be okay. And it's like, yes, it hurts a lot, and I am walking a bit like Igor because one side is spasmed and one is not, and I'm okay. And like you said, with that experience of going from the terror of what that can feel like to the actual like, it hurts and it's okay. And actually, I'm multi-dimensional enough to hold both those things at once. Whereas I think historically I'd have thought Deb and I have this whole yes and thing that we've been on about for about 10 years. And it's that thing of like, I don't have to be terrified or in the okayness. I can be in both, or I can be in safety and be in pain. And actually, that's okay. And I want to circle back to the emotions part that you both touched on, because I think that's so important here. And I think there's probably more that you can both unpack around that, around this whole idea that some emotions are good and some are bad. And I think another good example of that is like I need things like anger to motivate me at times. The opposing end of anger is also passion. I don't want a passionless life because I'm too scared of my rage, or that I've put rage at one end and passion at the other. You used to do a lot of work with this kind of thing of looking at like opposing emotions that actually, if you go far enough out on the spectrum, they become the same thing again anyway. And the obvious one is fear and excitement, where if you sit with, I don't know, is this in your book as well, or have I read another book? I can't remember if I was reading another book at the same time, but there was this idea that like fear gives you that like feeling, but also excitement is like and it's like actually that's a really one a lot of people can have a tangible experience. I think it was Glennon Doyle in her book
Mm.
coined the word skited, which was like being scared and excited at the same time. And I used to use it a lot with the kids when we were going on roller coasters. They'd be like, oh, I'm so scared. I'm like, yeah, but are you, or are you skited? And they got it because it was that visceral experience of the thought creating the sensation for them. They're like, oh yeah, like actually I am both yes and at the same time. And yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. If there's anything more we can help people to, I'm always like, how can I apply this? I'm always like, how can I help people get this more? How can I use this in practice and in other areas of my life? Like, how can we help people recognize so there's sort of, I've got two questions. There's the thing around the emotions, but I think it also ties into, I loved the phrase thought thunderstorm in your book, because I'm like, oh my God, I totally know what that feels like. But I'd love if you could also maybe expand on how people might recognize if they're caught in that kind of thought thunderstorm, and maybe then the connection between that and that emotional labeling, because I think there's a strong connection there as well.
Yeah, I love the visual aid of a snow globe. Because when you shake the snow globe, you lose sight of what's actually inside. And each of one of those snowflakes is like a thought. So it's a bit like that thought thunderstorm. So I think when we innocently get caught in that thought thunderstorm, we lose sight of our wisdom and our innate health. We all have innate health and well-being built in, but it gets covered over by layers of thoughts and thinking. I so yeah, I think it's important to find a way that like this understanding is used in businesses and in prisons and in psychiatric units. And some of the stories are amazing. Like I would really strongly recommend you look at Dr. Bill Pettit. He's a psychiatrist actually based in Phoenix. And he's done a lovely series with an English Dr. Elizabeth Lovius. It's on YouTube and it's called Real Change Portal. And it's a series of talks where he just shares story after story after story. You could listen to him all day of how he has introduced this understanding into like the most severe psychiatric units, and the turnaround for some of those inpatients is nothing short of a miracle. Uh, so yeah, I wanted to come back to say that it's used in businesses. You know the way if you're in a business meeting and you're trying to solve a problem and you're like brainstorming different solutions, it's and some of the business directors would say it wasn't until they went home that evening and were standing in the shower that clarity came and they saw the solution really clear to the problem. So, and I know for myself, when I'm sort of caught up in my thoughts and my thinking, you can't see clearly. And it's not until I find from me very often when I'm walking the dogs through a forest that and it's not the actual act of doing something like that. It's just that it allows your mind to quiet enough for wisdom to be found. Because we all do have that inside. So yeah, I don't know whether that sort of answers your
I
No,
think
thank
that
you.
touches on something else as well around, we'll come back to the emotions thing, like I'm not going to forget that, that's still there.
yeah.
It's like, actually, what are some practical ways people can achieve that? So you've mentioned, even in this, you've mentioned that one time for you was that poem on just a random poem on Facebook that seemed to give you that shift. The
Mhm.
walking the dogs, like what are some, do you have any other sort of practical suggestions for people who might be stuck in that?
You see, the thing about the principles is that there's nothing to do.
Right.
It's really just when you gain an insight, a sight from within that brings clarity. It's again, it's hard to put into words, Claire, because it's something formless that I'm trying to explain, if you know what I mean.
Mm.
But yeah, they're very clear in the three principles community that there isn't a list of things to do.
Oh,
It's really like I had moments of insight that have been life-changing. And sometimes it's like drip, drip, drip. Sometimes it's bigger moments. Like I'll give you an example of one, a sort of really deep insight that really impacted me was a I was caught in a cycle of a very negative thinking about a situation that had happened, which I don't really want to go into. But I was replaying it again and again in my head, and I was stuck in a victim mode. And somebody pointed that out to me, and I took it really hard. I thought, well, I don't want to be stuck in this victim mode anymore. I want to be able to move past it. I should be able to move past it because I know about the three principles. But I was stuck. And it wasn't until I was walking the dogs one day that I just almost heard this voice, and it just said, you're only a victim for as long as you keep choosing to believe those victim thoughts. And I think I can apply that to so many other aspects of my life. Like I'm only insecure for as long as I keep choosing to believe those insecure thoughts. So you can put anything in there. I So yeah, that's been a powerful insight for me. So yeah, and everybody hears something different
Mhm.
mm.
in the principles. So it's what works for me might not work for you. Do you know what I mean? So it's a very personal journey.
Oh, I realize we haven't actually, and again, I do recognize that you said it's very hard to put the three principles into words, but I don't know if it might be worth trying, just for the sake of the podcast listeners. We haven't actually touched on what the three principles are, and I know in the book there's that breakdown of the thought, mind, and consciousness that would be
Yeah,
maybe worth
yeah.
bringing to this for people who haven't got your book yet.
Yeah, so I'll share a little bit about how the three principles came into being even.
Mm.
There was a Scottish welder called Sydney Banks who worked in, I think it was Vancouver Island, in Canada, and he was having problems in his marriage, and his wife always wanted him to go to these different like sort of seminars that were being held to try and help their marriage. So they went eventually to one which he was very resistant to go to, and he really didn't like it, because it was all about getting your anger out. And yeah, so he was walking along the beach one day and he bumped into a psychiatrist that had was on the same seminar, and they had this conversation. And he had a real insight when the psychiatrist said to him, Sid, you're not insecure, you just think you are.
Mm.
And then he went on to have basically an enlightened experience. where he saw all of this and then he tried to explain it to people. And as he gathered a group of people that were starting to understand it, they thought they had to put it into some sort of form so that people would understand it.
Mm.
So he never really wanted to create the three principles, but a he was sort of forced into it to help to be able to spread this information. But it's really just an understanding of how our experience is created in each and every moment through the power of thought. Thought is a gift, and it's a creative gift that we get to use in any way that we want to
Mhm.
create our own experience. And you know that famous saying too, that every cell in our body is eavesdropping on our thoughts. So I think that's a very powerful a statement, that brings the mind and the body together.
Makes me think of Einstein's quote about it was meant to be a servant, not the master. And
Mhm.
the other thing, as you were talking, it kind of I understand Sydney Banks not wanting to put it in linear form because it's
Yes.
something that came in from creativity, and it sounds like you know putting it into a format helps people make that bridge, that leap. If you're really wired to think, I just don't think I am wired to think. I'm more of a creative thinker. I just always have been. So I had
Mhm.
trouble in school. Because some of the stuff you're talking about, I can't say that I've experienced it in that way, because I do process through art. I do process through more of an uh, emotional place. I don't get caught in linearity as much. I can't say that I never do. I'm sure I do. I just tend to. I'm wired differently through my experiences, but I do understand the nonlinear. It's really, this is where I struggle in bringing my work into the world, because you need to have a bridge between all of this multidimensional nonlinear experiences where, if who I just thought of as I was talking was Jill Bolte Taylor, when she lost her left brain and she lost the ability to go, this is me, that too. She lost a lot of that linear mind. And it's really in the yes and world of where we work, is like it's very important to have both abilities. And when one is too loud, you can't hear the genius and wisdom within. And
Mhm.
so that's why when you're connected out in nature, or you're breaking the energy of your thoughts
Mhm.
somehow with some, so it's not always about doing, but there's something about breaking the energy of your thoughts. Taking a shower really does that, right? you
Mhm.
know um and I think that's what Claire was kind of asking about, like, but you know just you personally, I think on that level, the three principles might not have that within it, but you must work with your clients in that way. Is there, when your clients are struggling with that, do you have things that can help them find a way to be in the presence of their thoughts without letting their thoughts drive them to the point where they're looping in their cycles?
Yeah, well, I think when I'm now working more with the mind and the body with my clients, so I'm doing like a body mind coaching
Mm-hmm.
and then the body work, the myofascial release. And I think the combination is beautiful because it really addresses both the mind and the body. I Even more so than myofascial release, because when I came across myofascial release at the start, I came from a very linear physiotherapy training,
Mm-hmm.
and it had never occurred to me about the mind body connection. So I feel that myofascial release was my first big leap into that sort of realm. But then I feel like the the three principles then has brought another depth to that. So yeah, I think having the combination of the work is really, really powerful, and just helping people to see that, you know. emotions and sensations are basically love letters from our body,
Hmm.
just trying to get our attention to maybe guide us to show us that our thoughts and our thinking are going off track.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is really important part of our conversation because working at the clinic, I know the bias is there in the myofascial world from our mentor, and he really loves to keep it all so simple and thinks that this is all you need, which to a certain degree, I agree.
Mhm.
The principles of how we work with the body, but I believe I'm going to get crucified for this, but I believe what's missing in that is that inclusion of what John calls the 600-pound gorilla, because
Mhm.
you can release the tissue, you can do the unwinding. But if you don't address the gorilla, they're going to come right back to it.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure each one of us has experienced that phenomenon in the work, receiving the work, doing the work, and so I'd love for you to address any MFR therapists that are watching this because there is such a taboo when you go against the mainstream MFR mainline, like dog.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think dogma, but it's kind of that way because I know
Yeah.
he's anti shamanic practices and shamanism. But the reason I found shamanism was because of myofascial release, the experiences I was having personally. Shamanism for me was the perfect um, uh, model or container for me to express that aspect of who I am as a soul in a human being, in a human body. So, yeah, I'd love to hear any thoughts you want to share about that taboo.
Well, what pops into my mind is that I always remember John saying in one of the seminars that solidified fascia equals fear.
Mhm.
And we can release fascia all day long. But if there's still that fearful thinking happening, then of course the fascia is going to brace again.
Mhm.
So, I just think it's really important to help the client to realize where that fear is coming from in the first place. And it's from their thoughts and it's from them innocently believing fearful thoughts
Yeah.
that enter their head
Mhm.
that are not true, but they're grabbing hold of it, and then it comes into form,
Yeah.
in the
Yeah,
in the body.
it's the familiar, it's the known, right?
Yeah.
It's really interesting too, because when you break what's familiar and you go, and this actually happened to me in my practice when I was living back east. I had a client, she came in for one session, and she was a chronic pain client. I treated her, I think it was like an hour and a half introductory session. She called me the next day. So she felt good and everything. And she was like, oh, that's amazing. And she booked a bunch of sessions. She called me the next day, canceled them all. And what she told me was waking up pain free was the scariest thing that she had ever experienced. And she wasn't ready for it yet. And I was like, what?
Yeah, I can also speak to that. So I have a client who I've treated for a long time, chronic pain, and years back we were stuck in a cycle. Like he was coming for an hour a week, nothing was changing, and I ended up getting in his face about it and being like, "Do you want to get better?" And he went, "Yeah." And I, for some reason, I must have been feeling very courageous that day. Went, "I don't believe you." And I will always remember this because he went, "You're right. It serves a purpose for me to be sick." He then got better, but because he had the courage to admit it and to be honest. And so there was a massive shift in his system because of that. And he went from being dependent on painkillers and other things to working full time and absolutely succeeding in his life because he was willing to be vulnerable and be courageous about and be honest. And it's like I think that speaks hugely to the power of our own power in changing our experience, which ties in with what we've been speaking about. And also it's funny just with the myofascial release belief systems of the so only myofascial release therapists will really understand this. So in myofascial release world, we talk about, or we're taught about channel 3 and channel 5, which absolutely messes with everybody because they're like, what? Why is it 3 and 5?
Yeah.
And it's this
Everybody
idea
wants
that
to be
channel
five.
3
Nobody
is,
wants to be three.
well, channel 3 is the wisdom and channel 5 is the thought thunderstorm, right? For want of it, if we're using the language we've been using in this conversation. And I think what I love about what you're saying, Julie, is actually there is a bridge. It's probably channel 4. And it's that thing of befriending channel 5. I love that you said that thoughts are a gift. Like, you don't hear that often in spiritual healing world. It's all like, thoughts are the enemy, thoughts are bad, stop thinking. I'm like, well, I'm never going to. Have you met me? Like, both of you know well enough how fast I think, I think. Like, it's not going to happen. I think it was funny when we were talking earlier, like, Julie, you come from body, Deb, you come from like spirit, and I come definitely from thinking.
I come from some other planet.
If I could have thought myself there, I'd have done it by the time I was about 12. Um, but I didn't understand that my thoughts carried energy, and I didn't understand that I wasn't my thinking either. Right? That did not come to me till a lot later. And I think I'm always Deb's hit up against this in me because I am heavily defensive around my thinking as well. That it is not bad. That like my thinking is not. I had it not that long ago with someone who went, "Oh, you just need to slow down and be quiet." Not in the way you're talking about, Judy, but in the like basically like stop thinking. I'm like, that's just not going to happen. I've sat in enough ashrams, monasteries, psychiatric units, like where not psychiatric units, but, you know, like places where people are trying to get me to stop thinking. It's like actually what I needed to do was befriend my thinking and learn how to see it as a gift and learn how to use it and to not. You talked about the clouds floating across, and it's like, yeah, to be like, okay, my thinking has a lot of power to a point, and also I can just tell it to go away and it won't hate me for it. Like, it will be okay. And I think learning that, I think Eckhart Tolle, there's something about this someone this week about how there's some line in his books that say that we're only 3% of us is the thinking, and then there's another 97%. And I'm like, wow, like we're all so. I definitely was like 100% mind identified before a certain experience in my 20s that rocked that, because I learned, as you said, that my thinking was not to be trusted and 97% of it was absolute rubbish. And and that I can judge my beingness and my state of health by the quality of my thinking. So you're talking about the movie. I could watch the same movie 3 times and have a completely different experience within myself, dependent on how I was that day. So if I was in fear and I watch something scary, I'm going to be scared. If I'm quite content, it's probably not going to bother me. And if I'm in a really, like, I don't know, another state, I'm going to have another response. And it being like, okay, learning how to recognize that, I think, has been a huge thing for me, of being like, and I think there's a lot in that recognition.
So that talks to the level of consciousness.
Mm,
And an example that I read in one of the 3P books was about, you know, we sometimes we're in a low state of mind and sometimes we're in a higher state of mind or level of consciousness. And the same situation can affect us totally differently, just
mm,
exactly as what you described. So he described in the book, I think it was Jack Pransky, who's one of the 3P teachers. He said he was swimming in a pool and doing lengths, and there was two little girls came in and they started swimming widths. And he just found it so annoying because he wanted to do lengths and they were just playing and, enjoying themselves. And he said he could suddenly see that when he was in a low mood, he was furious, he was angry. And then as his state of mind started to lift, he reached a point where he was just neutral with it. And then he actually got curious, compassionate, and then actually ended up being grateful that the two little girls could actually enjoy themselves in the pool. So it just depends on your level of consciousness that will affect how or what thoughts, are loudest in
Mhm.
your head.
Yeah.
And our habitual thinking tends to be the loudest, and that's the hardest sometimes to
Mhm.
let go of. So it's not that you're trying to take a negative thought and change it into a positive thought. That's more like CBT. It's
Mm.
really just recognizing that it is a thought and it will pass unless you grab a hold of it and go down a rabbit hole and add lots more thoughts and thinking, and that ends you up in that thought thunderstorm sort of place.
Yeah, it sounds like bringing awareness to the situation, feeling your body, and having the understanding of how the whole system works, right?
Yeah.
You were talking about that, and I was like, oh yeah, I kind of had an example of that yesterday. Hungry, tired, and hot in a small, unfamiliar kitchen, trying to get dinner going with my grandson yelling, ah, and it's like right through it. But it's like I got irritated. I didn't throw my anger at anybody. I let myself feel the irritation, and I actually said to my husband, like, this is a lot right now. Well, first thing he did, he turns on the air conditioner to get cool air blowing through the kitchen. I'm like, oh wow, why didn't I think of that? But it is interesting, like just everyday life that can, you throw this on, you throw this, like stressors, this stressor, that other stressor. So we're not even talking about like chronic pain now. It's like pain of being alive as a human being, right? Having to get along with all the others. Yeah.
Yeah. I
So,
think there's a nice um phrase that you use in your book is the one about getting out of your head and into your life. So I guess a nice wrap-up question would be like, what gifts have you had from this whole new level of learning and that capacity to get into your life, and how that has manifested and changed how you, not just how you work, but it sounds like it's shifted where you live from in a way as well.
Definitely. I think it it has revealed to me the possibility for a much quieter mind,
Mm.
that there is a space beyond thought, and that's a space that I crave more of. I and I just find that naturally I don't get as distracted with all the thoughts and thinking, that I can see them for what they are and I can just let them pass. I But yeah, I think we do tend to, when we are caught up in our thoughts and our thinking, we're living in either the past or the future, with fearful or worrisome thoughts that pull us into either the past or the future. And we spend so little time in the now, in the present moment. And I think through this understanding, that has really helped me to be more present. I like just a silly example. In the past, if I'd been doing a podcast like this, I would have had to have like a flip chart behind the computer with like all these points and prompts. But I was walking the dogs this morning and Deb had sent me a few questions, and just a flow of responses, just came through in that quiet moment. And I'm learning to trust that a lot more, to trust that I have wisdom inside, even though at school I was told I was dyslexic and illiterate and would amount to nothing. So I feel like my confidence, I've always had that confidence, but I didn't know I had it because of my beliefs and my thoughts about myself. So that there's been so many aspects of my life, my personal life, that have changed through this understanding. I, it also helps you to deal with difficult situations better, definitely. I Less judgmental of myself, less judgmental of others, because I'm realizing that each and every person is in a separate reality, depending on what thoughts and thinking are going through their head. I, and who am I to judge someone else for what thoughts they innocently are believing or grabbing a hold of? So yeah, there's been huge shifts in my personal life, and also in my work, obviously, as I've introduced this to my patients that are struggling with chronic pain. I've seen really big shifts in their not only in their pain story, but also in their personal life as well. So it's been amazing.
Yeah, I can say without any doubt, because I've worked with you and I know you, and I know some of your journey because I've worked with you, and
Yeah,
how, the person I see sitting in front of me now and how I'm experiencing you is so very different from where you first began with the launch of Finding the Mystery Within, and just the level of comfort I'm experiencing with you within yourself. I can feel that with you. And so, you know, there's nothing, there's the words that say it, but then there's being able to have the experience of you, like kind of a before and after. And yeah, it's an amazing transformation that I'm experiencing with you right now. One thing I wanted to say too is you have a booklet that you also came out with last year, and you were here for here, not here, but in Sedona with me
yeah,
for some treatment, and you left a copy behind. And since then, I've had several intensive patients, and I leave that out for them. They end up finding it. And then after they've read it, and I love the ease, the graphic illustrations. It's so easy for someone to grasp what is happening in the pain cycle and the pain thinking cycle, that it really lands in them and it shifts them, and it really makes my work easy. So it's a great tool, and I'd love for you to just tell show it off a few minutes before we end.
think I have one here.
yeah. It's just a little booklet called Rethinking Pain.
Mhm.
And it's really I was on a retreat with some other healthcare professionals, and we had to share a project that we were working on, and I was working on my book Quiet Mind, Quiet Body, and there was some GPs, I don't know what they're called in America, but like a general practitioner doctor, and they said to me, Julie, if you could summarize your book, Quiet Mind, Quiet Body, down to like one short booklet so that we could hand it to patients, to take away. So yeah, I got a lovely graphics designed, and it's really a summary of one of the chapters out of my Quiet Mind, Quiet Body book, which brings it all together just in a very simple and creative way, so that it is attractive to patients and they feel like it's manageable to read. So yeah, I give that to all my patients, and it's available on Amazon. Yeah,
Awesome. And so I'd love to make sure that's in the show notes, because I think it's a great tool for therapists to have to
yeah,
work with this aspect with their patients, no matter what kind of body work you do.
yeah.
If there was one thing that you could say to somebody that they might need to hear, that you think is like an important one-liner, what would you say?
I think it's that you're not broken.
Mm,
I think so many of patients that come to me as a last resort, a who unfortunately have had experiences with other healthcare professionals that they're made to believe that either their pain's all in their head or that they're broken and they can't be fixed. I know when I did the 6 week pilot program with my patients, that was the big takeaway that they all took away. I, that they're not broken and that everyone has innate health and well-being inside. We just lose sight of it.
that's beautiful. That is a beautiful note to finish on. The only thing I would love for you to share is ways people can find your book, find you, and anything else that I might want to know about Julie.
Yeah, well, my email address is julie at mfrni.com. So that's pretty easy. My website is quietbody.co.uk. And all three of my books are available on Amazon. The latest one, Quiet Mind, Quiet Body, is also available through Ingram Spark outlets. So I'm not sure what way that works, whether you like, I think it's in Barnes and Noble and stuff like that, but I think you maybe have to request it. I'm not 100% sure, but they're all available worldwide on Amazon.
Perfect. So we're going to have those links and ways to reach out to Julie in the show notes. And Claire, is there anything else that you want to add in before we say goodbye?
No, I just want to reiterate that amazing reimagining that Julie just gave at the end of that. If we could reimagine one belief system about ourselves based on this, it would be that I am not broken. It's very apt for me today. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today, Julie. And I want to say thank you to all of you for tuning in and listening to the Reimagine podcast.